Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Friday, the 19th of October, 2018. And the title of today's broadcast is Human Decency, Fracked for a Common Purpose. And for those who do follow my broadcasts and follow UK Column Live, will know that this is a mix of references to events and to an organisation that has been working for 30 years to undermine civil society in the UK and indeed elsewhere. Well, the particular reference to human decency is reference to the headline in yesterday's Times, which was an autistic woman pimped out by carers. Carers obviously being somewhat euphemistic here. But the article opened with this observation. The 23-year-old who has learning difficulties went through a 2-month trial approved by a court, during which random men would visit her Manchester care home for sex during daylight hours. Well, one has to wonder, of course, how random these men were. And, the greater likelihood is that they were very carefully chosen members of the establishment. And no doubt, freedom of information requests can be submitted only to be rebutted and dismissed for multiple reasons. And if, of course, it ever made its way to government, then no doubt the relevant information would be lost, or Theresa May, of course, would follow her previous track record and make sure it was lost. But the article goes on. The scheme was ended after 2 months when a psychiatrist told a judge that continuing to expose the woman to high-risk situations could lead to sexual abuse, violence, injury, or even death. Well, one has to wonder, really, what is going on when the courts effectively approve an autistic woman being pimped out. And the track record of establishment paedophilia and establishment sexual abuse would suggest that there's probably more than an off chance that this was a very carefully planned program. So what is really going on? Where is human decency? And this applies right across society. And many people watching these broadcasts and watching UK Column News may not realise it, but in many respects they are privileged. And this is particularly applicable to those who are the higher side of, say, 50, who have generally enjoyed a life of full employment and are actually approaching probably pensionable age and probably have the benefit of a final salary benefit pension, which very, very few people have today, because companies have gone for the less attractive, or more attractive for them, but less attractive for the individual, money purchase plans. Yet a very, very significant chunk of the population is experiencing abject poverty. And what we see with the British government and its recent appointments, we see the British government making futile and rather pathetic attempts to cover up the impact of its deliberate austerity program. So, recently, what have we seen? We've seen a couple of appointments. We've seen a minister for mental health. We've seen a minister appointed to attempt to reduce suicide. But of course, the real role of these ministers is simply to trot out the palliatives, the explanations as to why suicides are increasing, as to why mental health is increasing, or problems associated with mental health are increasing, to those who are not affected, and just keep them on board. And as somebody tweeted out a couple of days ago, why doesn't the government just do the right thing, do the honest thing, and appoint a minister for fuck off and die? Because that's what this government wants. And the reason this government wants it is because that's what the corporatocracy wants. And this agenda has been driven for some 30 years plus, but certainly we can trace it back in the UK. We can trace the architects of this agenda in the UK back to Common Purpose and her name escapes me for a second, Middleton, who founded this charity and has basically worked with prime ministers from both sides of the political spectrum to introduce training programs that have effectively groomed sociopaths for roles in civil society. And their role has been to destroy whatever institution they are appointed to. Now, for those who are not aware of Common Purpose, of course, this just sounds like rampant conspiracy. But what I can suggest is do your own research. And you can start by going to the Common Purpose Exposed website, which is www.cpexposed.com. And this is a website that was established by Brian Gerrish, who has been working to expose the role of Common Purpose in undermining civil society in this country for the last 30 years. And on his website, CP Exposed, Brian writes, Common Purpose is a UK charity which creates future leaders, inverted commas, of society. Common Purpose selects individuals and trains them to learn how society works, who pulls the levers of power, and how Common Purpose graduates can use this knowledge to lead outside authority. So in other words, to basically do what they are instructed to do by those who have their loyalty, which is not necessarily those who are paying their salaries. Common Purpose was engaged by at least one government department to explain big society, David Cameron's attempt to roll out the totalitarian corporate state without anyone paying too much attention to the real agenda. This is the corporatization of society. And of course, the evidence of this is pretty much everywhere you look. Then services, support services that have traditionally been underpinned by central government are being privatized. And of course, everything is about driving profit. And of course, the senior managers of these corporate entities make out like bandits, whilst effectively destroying the service that they have taken over in many cases from the local authority. And then when they fail, they are given massive payoffs. And as we've seen, Common Purpose graduates make out like bandits when they are found out and fired, because everybody works on the principle that when the corruption is uncovered, nobody wants to be accused of not spotting it, or worse, being complicit. And a classic example of this, of course, is the chief executive of Gateshead Council, Sheena Ramsey, who over the last 5 years has been through Knowsley City Council in Liverpool and Worcester City Council. She received a £330,000 severance payment from Knowsley, and doesn't appear to be too much of an explanation as to why that might have been. Probably to keep quiet on something that the councillors of Knowsley don't want leaked out into the public domain. And in Worcester, a judge actually ruled that Worcester Council should be more transparent in revealing the allegations of corruption against their former chief executive, Sheena Ramsey. So on what basis was Sheena Ramsey the best candidate to be appointed as chief executive to Gateshead Council? Well, over the last few years, Gateshead Council has had its budget reduced so significantly that it's the equivalent of £800 per household in the Gateshead area. And Sheena Ramsey has managed this decimation of the social services and council services in the Gateshead area, whilst of course installing the LED streetlights, which are 5G ready. And of course, last week in the Newcastle Crown Court, Justice Nolan ruled that the concerns of Mark Steele were certainly genuine and needed to be treated seriously by Gateshead Council. Well, don't expect to see any mass response from Gateshead Council anytime soon. And Sheena Ramsey, who clearly perjured herself in court during the course of that day, will of course get off scot-free unless the people of Gateshead actually take an interest and start to ask the pertinent questions, because nobody outside Gateshead cares. So Sheena Ramsey is a complete irrelevance to anyone outside Gateshead. But the people of Knowsley in Liverpool and the people of Worcester could maybe assist the people of Gateshead get rid of this parasite who was trained by Common Purpose as long ago as 1992. So this is something that is parasitic in our society and is eradicating human decency. It's eradicating care, because the corporate entity cannot embrace care, cannot embrace compassion, because it's contrary to the primary agenda, which is profit. Let me rephrase that: greed, particularly amongst those who are in the leadership and senior management roles. It's protect my salary check, because in many cases people are in hock to their salary check. Many of these people are literally 3 salary checks away from their properties being repossessed, because if they don't pay their mortgage for 3 months, and they are mortgaged to the absolute hilt. So they will literally prostitute their soul, they will prostitute their basic humanity in return for that salary check. Now, for those people who do not yet appreciate what's going on in society, in British society, because they haven't looked at it, please scratch beneath the surface, because you're all right, Jack, but there's a hell of a lot of people out there who are not. And the fact that you're all right means that you have an opportunity to do the right thing and dedicate some of your time to researching why it is that society in the UK is devoid of care and compassion, and the courts rule that an autistic 23-year-old can be pimped out to random members of the public. Something is not right. And the onus is on each and every one of us to address these issues, because the establishment relies on people not having the motivation to actually get involved in something that doesn't concern them, until such time, of course, as it gets up real close and personal and impacts on one of their family. And then all of a sudden, they can't understand why nobody's taking an interest in it. Well, I have no axe to grind in this whatsoever. I'm not directly impacted, and nobody within my family or immediate circle of friends is directly impacted. But what we do see, what we see collectively, disturbs us greatly. And it's not a criticism that people haven't yet got involved in this, because we completely understand the importance, obviously, of protecting what you have, of making sure that you keep a roof over your head and food on your table. But unless we address this cancer in British society, it is going to spread. And, you know, the British government just wants us to apply a bit of chemo here and there, which of course generally makes the cancer worse. Doesn't want us to cure it. But this is what we have to do. And we have to start taking care of each other. And that goes beyond the immediate family and our immediate circle of friends. Because once we, the collective we, start to let those who are dependent upon our acquiescence for their salary, once they start to realize that we, the collective we, are taking an interest, we might just start to see some changes. Now, ultimately, the change needs to be systemic, and that isn't going to happen overnight. So, let's start with Gateshead. We'll be back in court with Mark Steele next Tuesday, and we'll see there if two of the councillors elect to perjure themselves in court with their allegations against Mark Steele, and that is going to be next Tuesday at the Gateshead Law Courts, right in the heart of Gateshead. So if you can get along to join us at 10 o'clock, we'll be there for 9:30 outside the Gateshead Law Courts on Tuesday. And let's see if justice prevails again. We've had two great results in the past week. First of all, Gateshead with Justice Nolan effectively overturning the gagging order that Gateshead Council managed to get, preventing Mark Steele from talking about 5G and the LED streetlights. And of course, earlier this week in the Court of Appeal, where the judges quashed the sentences, the jail sentences that had been given by Judge Altham against the 3 truck surfers at Preston New Road. Now, tomorrow there's going to be a mass gathering at Preston New Road. And obviously, the more people that are there, then the more it sends the message to the establishment and to Quadrilla that, first of all, their injunction isn't worth the paper it's written on. And we're certainly looking to drive a massive wedge through these corporate injunctions granted by the corporate courts, who are choosing to totally ignore the science, the academic studies, and the experiential evidence from communities, particularly in the US, Canada, and Australia, that have been subjected to the abomination of hydraulic fracturing. So, it's not over yet, but I do sense that, first of all, I think that Quadrilla have got a few problems at Preston New Road, which, of course, they're not being particularly transparent about. But those people watching closely are observing some unexpected behaviours, which would indicate that everything is not necessarily going as it should, which shouldn't be any great surprise because, of course, they are a bunch of cowboys. And they also know that the first thing that goes wrong, seriously wrong, means the end of unconventional gas exploitation in the UK. So I do sense that, we're getting very, very close to seeing the back of this industry. But, this is the time to keep the foot firmly on the pedal and just ram it home. And yesterday, Jeremy Corbyn gave his clearest message yet that fracking will be shut down, if it's not already, if he makes it into number 10. And, just to reiterate, I have never, ever suggested that Jeremy Corbyn getting into number 10 is going to be the panacea. In fact, my primary motivation for wanting to see Jeremy Corbyn in number 10 is so that the people of this country can see for themselves that it doesn't matter who is in number 10. It's the deep state that determines the agenda. And whomever is in number 10 is simply there as the figurehead to enable the deep state to pursue its corporatist agenda. So the important thing is get out and meet people. And of course, part of the corporatist agenda is to reduce the opportunities for people to get together. And this is being done systematically. Of course, the smoking ban was a big part of this, which has led to pubs closing, throughout the country. And now, of course, the high street is under attack. And this is the primary reason why business rates are being pushed sky high to force small businesses away from the high street. Because the high street and town centre markets are a place where people come together. And the ultimate objective of the corporatists is to effectively push people so that they literally go home, switch on the TV for their dose of propaganda, and then rock out to work to do the bidding of the corporatists on minimum wage and 0 hours contracts. And if you think that the UK doesn't have a culture of slavery, then you're not paying attention. So thanks again for joining me today. Please do use the weekend to do some research and look no further, or start no further. Somebody is absolutely desperate to speak with me here, and I will promise to call them back in just a second. But look, start with the website of CP Exposed and look how this charity has sought to undermine civil society in the UK over the past 30 years. Okay, you have a great weekend, and I will be back with you on Monday at 8:30. You take care now.